What would you do if you stepped outside one morning, only to find your own parking spot stolen right out from under you? Not by some random stranger, not by an accident, but by your entitled neighbor, the one who always seems to think the world revolves around them. That was exactly how my morning started. I was already running late for work, juggling my coffee, keys, and the 1,000 things on my mind. The plan was simple: get in my car, drive to the office, and somehow survive the day. But as soon as I stepped outside, my stomach dropped. Karen. There she was, sitting in my parking spot, sipping her overpriced coffee in her shiny new SUV like she belonged there. Like the spot wasn't mine. Like she hadn't just parked her car directly in front of my house, in the same space I'd used for years. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she had car trouble, maybe she didn't realize, but then I saw the smirk. She wasn't clueless. She knew exactly what she was doing. I stormed over, knocking on her window. She barely glanced up before rolling it down painfully slow, as if I was interrupting her personal moment of peace. "Oh, hey," she said, casual as ever. I pointed at her car. "Karen, this is my spot." She raised an eyebrow. "I didn't see your name on it." My jaw clenched. "Are you serious? I've parked here for years. You have your own driveway." She shrugged, taking another sip. "I don't like parking there." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She sighed dramatically, like she was being asked to move a mountain instead of her car. "Look, I'm just here for a few minutes. I had to drop something off for the HOA. It's not a big deal." I glanced past her and saw something that made my blood boil even more. Her driveway. Completely empty. There was a perfectly good space right in front of her house, just as convenient as mine. I gestured toward it. "Then why don't you park there?" Karen's face hardened. "I don't like parking there," she repeated, this time sharper. "This spot is more convenient." It took everything in me not to lose it right then and there. I had lived in this neighborhood for years. I had followed the rules, respected people's space, never caused a problem. And yet, Karen decided that today, of all days, she was entitled to my spot. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Karen, move your car. Now." She rolled her eyes and huffed. "You're being dramatic. It's just a parking space. You can park somewhere else. Not on your life." I folded my arms, refusing to budge. She stared me down for a moment, clearly expecting me to cave like everyone else had in the past. But I wasn't about to back down. Finally, with an exasperated sigh, she started her car and slowly pulled out. But just before she drove off, she gave me one last entitled glare, the kind that said, "You'll regret this." And that was the moment I realized, this wasn't over. The next morning, I woke up with one goal in mind: make it impossible for Karen to pull this stunt again. I wasn't going to let her turn my parking spot into her personal VIP space. She thought she could just take what she wanted, but not this time. Not anymore. So before the sun even fully rose, I was already at the hardware store, grabbing exactly what I needed. An official-looking "No Parking" sign. Big. Bold. Impossible to ignore. By the time I hammered it into the ground, right in front of my house, I felt a rush of satisfaction. The sign was crystal clear, and "No parking. Violators will be towed." I even made sure to position it at just the right angle so anyone approaching the spot would see it immediately. I stepped back, admiring my work. Let's see Karen try to ignore this. That afternoon, I didn't have to wait long. Like clockwork, I saw her SUV creeping down the street, heading straight for my spot. The moment her eyes landed on the sign, she slammed on the brakes. For a solid 5 seconds, she just sat there, staring at it, her face shifting from confusion to sheer disbelief. Then came the outrage. Karen pulled up to the curb, rolled down her window, and jabbed a perfectly manicured finger toward the sign. What the hell is this? I leaned casually against my door, pretending to think. Looks like a no parking sign. She scoffed, stepping out of her car and marching toward me. You can't just put up signs wherever you feel like it. This isn't your private property. Actually, I said, folding my arms, it's been my designated spot for years. And since you clearly have a problem respecting that, I thought a little visual aid might help. Her jaw clenched. You're being ridiculous. You can't enforce this. Oh, I can. I've already got a tow company on speed dial. She let out an exaggerated laugh, like I had just told the funniest joke in the world. Yeah, good luck with that. I'll have the HOA all over you for this. I smiled. By all means, Karen. Call them. For the first time since this started, I saw the slightest flicker of uncertainty in her expression. But then, as if doubling down, she flipped her hair, shot me a condescending smirk, and climbed back into her SUV. Hope you enjoy wasting your money on that stupid sign, she muttered before peeling away. I watched her go, my gut telling me this wasn't the end of it. And I was right. The next day, an official-looking letter from the HOA arrived in my mailbox. The moment I opened it, my stomach twisted. Notice of violation, unauthorized signage. I read through the letter, my pulse quickening with every word. According to the HOA, my sign was against community guidelines and had to be removed immediately. If I refused, I'd be fined. I didn't need 3 guesses to figure out who was behind this. Karen. She had wasted no time running to the HOA, twisting the story to make me look like the problem. And judging by the letter, they had sided with her. I gritted my teeth. Of course they did. Karen had always found a way to get what she wanted. And now, she had turned the HOA into her personal attack dog. But what really made my blood boil? That afternoon, as I was fuming over the letter, I glanced outside, just in time to see Karen pull into my spot again, smirking up at my house as if daring me to do something about it. She had played me. She had waited for the HOA to step in before taking her victory lap. And now? Now, she thought she had won. But she had no idea who she was messing with. I stood by my window, gripping the HOA letter so tightly it nearly crumpled in my hand. Karen had played her cards perfectly. First, she stole my spot. Then, she twisted the situation so that I was the one getting reprimanded. And now? She was sitting there in my parking spot again, bold as ever, completely untouchable. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the HOA and demand an explanation, but before I could dial, something stopped me. What good would it do? Karen had them wrapped around her finger. Complaining wouldn't fix anything, it would just make me look like the unreasonable one. No, if I was going to win this, I had to be smarter. So instead, I started digging. For the next few hours, I combed through every HOA document I could find, guidelines, community rules, old emails, even archived newsletters. I searched for anything that could prove Karen wasn't as untouchable as she thought. And that's when I found it. An old HOA zoning document, one that clearly stated each resident had a designated parking space in front of their property, provided they maintained the area. I had never claimed my spot, I had simply used it for years, as had every other homeowner on the street. The only difference was that no one else had ever needed to fight for theirs. Armed with this, I reached out to some neighbors, ones who had also dealt with Karen's antics. It didn't take much convincing. Everyone had a story. The couple down the street who had received a complaint because their holiday decorations were too bright. The single mother who had been threatened with a fine for leaving her garbage bins out 5 minutes too long. The elderly man whose mailbox Karen had reported for being the wrong shade of beige. It wasn't just me. Karen had been harassing everyone. And for the first time, people were ready to fight back. So, when the next HOA meeting rolled around, I didn't go alone. The moment Karen saw me walk in with half the neighborhood behind me, her smug expression faltered just a little. But she recovered quickly, arms folded, head held high, fully expecting the board to side with her. I let her speak first. She put on a performance, claiming I had been hostile, unreasonable, and unwilling to cooperate. She even gestured toward the HOA president, her cousin, as if that was enough to settle the matter. But then, it was my turn. I took a deep breath, then laid out everything. The zoning documents. The pattern of complaints. The inconsistencies in how the HOA enforced rules depending on who was involved. I didn't stop there. I handed over written statements from neighbors, detailing Karen's long history of weaponizing the HOA for her own benefit. The room went silent. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably as the evidence piled up. Then, the final blow. I turned to the HOA president and said, "You approved a violation notice against me. But according to your own records, Karen has been illegally extending her backyard fence onto community property for years. I assume you'll be sending her a fine next." Karen's face drained of color. The president stammered, flipping through his notes, realizing, too late, that I had caught them all red-handed. By the end of the meeting, the board had no choice but to back down. My parking spot? Officially recognized as mine. My fine? Revoked. My sign? Allowed to stay. Karen? Silenced for the first time in her life. As I left the meeting, she wouldn't even look at me. For the first time, she had lost. But I wasn't naive. I knew Karen well enough to understand this wasn't over. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. Karen had lost the HOA meeting, and I had finally gotten my parking spot officially recognized. But something told me this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. No, she was the type to retreat, lick her wounds, and then come back with something even worse. And I was right. A few mornings later, I stepped outside to grab my mail and found another letter from the HOA. My stomach tightened the moment I saw the envelope, but nothing could have prepared me for what was inside. Due to recent complaints and disturbances, a new parking policy has been implemented. Effective immediately, all homeowners must apply for a $500 annual permit to park in front of their own homes. I read the letter twice, then a third time, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was targeted retaliation. Karen might not have been able to take my spot outright, but she had found a way to make me pay for it, literally. And the worst part? She wasn't just punishing me. This new policy applied to everyone. I stormed across the street, letter in hand, and pounded on her door. She opened it with a fake look of surprise, her signature coffee cup in hand. "Oh, morning, Alex. What's wrong?" I held up the letter. "You know exactly what's wrong." She barely glanced at it, then gave a mock sympathetic sigh. "Oh, that? Yeah, the HOA decided we needed a little more structure around here. Can't just have people claiming spots like they own them, you know?" I stared at her, barely able to contain my fury. She smiled. "Guess we're all playing by the rules now." That was it. That was the moment I decided this wasn't just about a parking spot. This was war. I went back inside and immediately started calling my neighbors. If Karen wanted to drag the entire neighborhood into this just to get back at me, fine. I'd make sure she regretted it. Within 24 hours, we had a petition circulating demanding the HOA repeal the new permit policy. Within 48 hours, we had over half the neighborhood signatures. Karen must have sensed the shift because she suddenly stopped acting so smug. Instead of parading around like she always did, she started keeping her head down. I even caught her avoiding eye contact when she walked past my house. But I wasn't done yet. I dug deeper, this time into the HOA itself. And that's when I discovered the bombshell. Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor with too much free time. She was directly related to the HOA president. Everything made sense. The ridiculous fines. The selective rule enforcement. The way the HOA jumped the second she complained but ignored everyone else's concerns. Karen had been abusing her connection to the HOA for years. And now? I had proof. I compiled everything, the fraudulent enforcement, the unfair fines, the clear abuse of power, and prepared to expose it all. At the next HOA meeting, I didn't just bring a petition. I brought evidence. I stood in front of the entire board, the entire neighborhood, and laid it all out. The biased rulings. The selective punishments. The permit scam. And finally, Karen's family connection to the HOA president. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the room. People whispered furiously. Even the board members looked panicked. The HOA president stammered, trying to deny everything, but the damage was done. Karen? She was completely silent. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she had nothing to say. The board had no choice but to back down. The permit rule? Abolished. The unfair fines? Revoked. The HOA president? Forced to resign. And Karen? She wasn't just humiliated. She was powerless. For the first time, she wasn't calling the shots. And I made sure she knew it. For the first time since this mess started, the neighborhood was quiet. The HOA had backed off, Karen had been exposed, and my parking spot? Still mine. But I knew Karen well enough to realize she wouldn't take this loss gracefully. She wasn't the type to admit defeat, she was the type to wait for the next opportunity to strike. And she did. A few days after the HOA meeting, I woke up to a loud, deliberate thud against my front door. Not a knock. A warning. I opened it cautiously, expecting to see Karen standing there with some new complaint, but instead, I found a large, official-looking envelope. No return address. Just my name in bold letters. I tore it open, half expecting another bogus fine or some last-ditch effort to make my life miserable. But as I read the letter, my jaw nearly dropped. It was an apology. From the HOA. They admitted they had mishandled the situation. That they had been too quick to take sides without properly reviewing the facts. That I had every right to my parking space, and that my "no parking" sign was, in fact, compliant with community regulations. Even more shocking, they acknowledged that Karen had been out of line. The HOA, the very same group that had sided with her at every turn, was now admitting they were wrong. For a moment, I just stood there, rereading the letter, almost not believing it was real. And the best part? Karen must have gotten the same letter. I didn't have to wait long to confirm it. The very next day, she came marching over, her face twisted with fury. "I can't believe you dragged the HOA into this," she spat the second she saw me. "You think this is over?" I leaned against my porch railing, completely unfazed. "Oh, I'm pretty sure it is." Her fists clenched at her sides. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I actually laughed. "Karen, I think I know exactly who I've been dealing with. And now? So does the entire neighborhood." For a second, she just stood there, seething. But there was nothing left for her to do. She had lost her battle. The HOA wasn't protecting her anymore. She couldn't manipulate the rules, couldn't threaten me with fines, couldn't use her connections to get her way. And she knew it. After a few more moments of silent rage, she spun on her heel and stormed off, slamming her door so hard it rattled the windows. That was the last time Karen ever tried to park in my spot. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood felt different. Calmer. Lighter. People weren't afraid to speak up anymore. A few neighbors even stopped by to thank me for standing up to her. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she had bullied over the years, I was just the first one to push back and win. As for Karen, she kept her distance. She still lived 2 doors down, but she never looked my way again. She had spent years making everyone miserable, thinking she could get away with it. But now? She had lost control. And I made sure she knew it. So, what would you do if your HOA backed the wrong person and tried to walk all over you? Have you ever had to deal with someone like Karen? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.